Welcome very much to a continuation of the program that aired earlier or yesterday in terms of MNN here with Ahmad Kamal, a long veteran at the intellectual understanding of the human condition from his whole life, but also for a 40-year stint as the ambassador of Pakistan to the United Nations. And we're talking about the human condition and the evolving challenges to the human society. And Ahmad, we had an hour. This is the second hour. Welcome back to Conversations.
My pleasure.
We had that program. We were talking about things in general terms and everything. And as you said, you sort of ticked off what it is you think we ought to talk about now, which would be some of the realities. Maybe you could tick off some of those you thought are worth our considering in this second part of the program.
Well, we have a number of global problems in the world today. And one can identify about a dozen of them as major problems.
Okay.
The first, and by far the most important, is the confrontation that is taking place between the concept of nationalism and the concept of globalism.
Okay, yeah.
Now, globalism is much older than nationalism because we've been living in a globalized world for centuries, whereas nationalism goes back just 400 years to the Treaty of Westphalia. Before that, nationalism did not exist. You had empires with frontiers which spread and which were constricted. But you had globalism, which was there always, and which existed literally for hundreds of years. There was no nationalism, no nation state before the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. And even this treaty, this concept of the nation state on which we are basing all our thinking today was challenged first by Napoleon and then by Hitler.
Both had very, very bad results.
In both cases.
Yeah, in both cases.
And then after the end of Hitler, which is end of World War II, the United Nations was established by the United States. And it was based on a concept of globalism, that is to say, of a world in which we are all interconnected.
And United Nations was the name,
for some surprising reason, the concept of globalism, created as it was by the United States, is now being questioned by the United States itself, which says we want to go back to nationalism and build a sort of a frontier or a wall around the country. And of course the United States can afford to do that because it is a very powerful country with 3,000 miles of water on both sides. So it can afford it. But we live in a world in which, unfortunately, we are all linked to each other inevitably. And so this effort to deny globalization and to go towards nationalism is, in my judgment, not going to survive. And we will come back to the original concept of global interaction and interconnectedness.
Very interesting, because we're all becoming united by the technology, the information technology. And you, sir, are an expert in terms of understanding that, because we've done programs with you before talking about the implications of the internet and all of the information technology emerging exponentially into the world.
Indeed, that is so. But other than this conflict between globalization and nationalism, there is something very funny which is happening in the world of today, which is that the status quo or the continuation of agreed systems is being questioned suddenly by everybody and everyone. And so in the past, if you wanted to question something which was established, people would come to you and say, why do you want that done? Now, if you want to question, people come to you and say, why not? And so people are accepting
new ideas?
Yeah, not the new, but the questioning.
Questioning,
and so people are doing things which in the past you could not do because you had to exercise restraint. And so restraint is being lessened in the world, and you are getting away with it, and that is creating a lot of confusion in the world because anybody can question anything today. So that is the second problem.
Wow, that's a biggie.
Very
yeah,
big.
Yeah.
The third major global problem that is arising is the growth of violence. Now, violence has always existed in the world because we are evolved from animals. And in the animal kingdom, you have violence. But in the animal kingdom, violence is clearly defined by two reasons only. One of them is food, and the other is sex or mating.
Yeah.
And so, but for these two reasons, animals are not violent. They'll be violent for food, to kill whatever they can get food, and they'll be violent for mating rights.
Yeah.
But we human beings have evolved to have violence for the sake of violence. We love fighting with each other. We love expanding. We want to be dominant. We want to go and conquer. And that has increased the level of violence in the world. And increasing the level of violence has been accompanied by an increase in the level of destructibility, of violent destructibility.
Well, the technology is allowing us to have destructive capabilities beyond anything we could have imagined in history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We now have weapons. We have weapons which can put anybody and anything into the Stone Age and beyond.
Yeah. No, we said in the earlier program we did with you that they are, according to research, we don't know for sure because they keep it in a certain sense secret, but it's particularly in the weapons of destruction on the nuclear front, thermonuclear tridents, by and large, by the United States of America in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, that the weapons are such a nature, and then wave weapons and other kinds of weapons that have developed, which was the means by which national sovereignty was asserted out of the past. So we're used to having that kind of an idea of the strong win and to take over, is being that they've become capable, apparently, in modeling of destroying or creating conditions at our own hand that would make it impossible for the Homo sapiens species to survive. Much like the 65 million years ago did in all of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and so forth that had ruled up until then and made way for something new, and that's the case, that it's reached a point of qualitative, not just quantitative change in terms of what we're confronted with.
Yes, and it is not just...
If that's maybe pushing it too hard.
Not just explosives, which are bombs and missiles, etc. It's also biotechnology. We can now modify your cell structure, and you will just die because your cells have been changed. So that is
an inflection point.
Yes, but
evolutionarily.
That is how the violence has increased enormously.
Yeah.
And then, along with that, violence has become glorified. If you look at cable news now, you find that violence is creating happiness. It's entertaining to see violence on television.
Yeah.
Because I would have thought...
Action at the interface.
I would have thought that violence would be toned down. No, it has been increased. We are glorifying violence. Then the next problem that we are facing is that the concept of religion and faith is being questioned. We have had in human history this growth of religions for thousands of years, of faith. Even in our standard religions, going back to Zoroastrianism in 2500 BC, and then Judaism and Christianity and Islam
Zoroastrian
and
might
Hinduism,
have been the earliest, maybe,
which discovered monotheism. So the concept of monotheism, and which led to the evolution of faith and justice and equity, is
or a higher order of things.
Yes, but it is being put in cold storage. And unfortunately, capitalism is replacing religion and faith. And that is a major global change which is taking place. Then the next very funny situation is because of poverty alleviation. We discussed this earlier, but there is a phenomenal gap now between those who are rich and those who are poor. And this cannot be accepted because you've got to get rid of poverty. And poverty alleviation can be done in only three ways. Either by giving money from the richer countries to the poorer countries, that is called aid, or you can do it through investment. The richer countries can invest in building up industries in the poorer countries, and that is very profitable because labor is cheaper in the poorer countries.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it can be done through trade, and trade in which both sides benefit because it is comparative advantage. But in all these three areas of aid, investment, and trade, we are coming up against problems. And so poverty alleviation is really not a priority in the global order of things today.
When in fact, that's the major challenge that we should all be really seriously considering how we can address.
Absolutely.
And it's not being by the intellectual community or otherwise.
If you don't.
Or the political community.
If you don't,
yeah,
you will have frustrations in the world.
And we have a great deal of that.
Frustrations will increase, and they will ultimately end up with what is called terrorism. And in terrorism, as you know, we always point a finger at somebody else and say, you are the terrorist.
Yeah, right.
Even though we should learn from Africa. In Africa, there's a proverb which says, don't point a finger at anybody, because if you do, you will find that three fingers are pointing back at you.
Yes, right.
And so there's great wisdom coming out of Africa. And so we are accusing others of terrorism without knowing that the three fingers are pointing back at us frequently. The next problem that we are having, and it's a global problem, is migration. Migration is a fundamental force in human history. All of us, you and me and everybody else in the world, are all emerging out of East Africa. We know that we are East Africans.
250,000 years ago.
And the only difference between you and me is in the strength of our legs. I had weak legs, so when I walked from Africa into Yemen, into Arabia, into Iran and India, I was tired, so I sat down. You had strong legs, so you walked from Africa into Yemen, into Arabia, into the Caucasus, into Siberia, across the Bering Strait into North America. So you have strong legs.
Well,
but that's the only difference. That's the only difference between you and me, is in the strength of our legs.
Could I interject for a minute like that? Because we've had all kinds of researches there. Like, have you had your DNA done yet?
Yes.
Have you had it? Have you done it? What did you find result?
African.
Well, we're all African. We're all 250,000 years ago. We're all out of Africa in there. And then there were some people who went all the way around to the Beringia and into the New World and everything they did. But I had mine done. My sister had may do that. And it was about 10 years ago. Spencer Wells, young fella down at National Geographic, he's still running the thing down there. And they had me do a thing, and I sent it in, and it came back and they have markers. They have markers on the DNA, and it's science. It's not projection. And they had 5 locations from that were identified in my DNA. And they had one, it was 60,000 years ago. This is what I understood. Spencer Wells is a major guy. He's really good on this question. That is relating to an individual male who existed 60,000 years ago and where he was. It doesn't know who or what or anything, but it was 60,000 years ago and it was in Abyssinia.
Abyssinia?
Yeah, Abyssinia. There was another one, it was in Iraq.
Yes.
That was later.
Yes.
And then there was one in the south of France.
Yes, Abyssinia, because even though the origin of the human species is from further south, it's on the border between where Lucy came from. It's a border between Uganda and Tanzania. But people walked north, and from Abyssinia they jumped across the Red Sea into Yemen, into Arabia. And that is from there that we spread north or eastwards or northeastwards.
Yeah, right.
So
in my case, it just went down with south of France. There was one, and then there was one that went up to, I'm Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you know, up into India. I mean, up into England, and that they came into the present. And that scientific understanding of the migration route of my ancestry, which is scientifically validatable, it's staggering.
No, but
that we can do this now.
That is why our skin colors are different, because I walked out of Africa into a region which had a lot of sunshine, and so I stayed dark or brown or whatever. You went into Europe where there is no sunshine and where the weather is horrible.
I get all pale.
So you became a pale face. That's
as
right.
They said in the Lone Ranger.
So bad weather is what gave you your skin color.
Yeah, but that's the case. Yeah, and what it is also underscoring how technological development is just going pell-mell now. It's going exponential.
Yeah.
Everything is going exponential in terms of our understanding the history and the whole evolution of human consciousness on this planet.
And so the choice that you have is either to have a skin color which is colored or a skin color which is colorless. And you can choose which of the two you would rather be.
Yeah, right. No, but we're all African. Yeah, that's right and everything. And we understand these things. And the science is now people could make these stories up and so forth in the past, but now it's based upon scientific understanding of the pattern of the planet, and the peopling of the planet.
The next major problem that we are having in the global world is the growth of conflicts. And these conflicts are emerging everywhere. Everybody is having a fight with everybody, either local or regional or ethnic conflicts. And people love violence.
Violence is some people say that certain psychologists or psychiatrists say violence is an identity quest.
I don't know.
Their identity is questioned, or their sense of identity is questioned, that they act out violence.
We are questioning identity because the Europeans spread in the whole world and brought in colonialism and denied identity to different places. Take what the British did. First they came into North America and they conquered this place and destroyed the indigenous population here. Then they went into Africa. It's the British who went into Africa and picked them up as slaves and brought them into their plantations. Then they went into India. India was 35% of the global economy. And they picked up all the factories in India, lock, stock, and barrel, and took them to Manchester and Leeds in Britain, and reduced India from 35% of the global economy to 3% of the global economy.
That's a big drop.
And then they went into China and converted the whole country into a bunch of opium eaters. And so this is the European contribution to the history of the world.
That's my heritage, because I'm a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I haven't got a chance. Because I'm the one, my people are the ones who conquered the world and are the enemy of the whole historical development.
You've just got to learn how to deny the past and to become a normal human being in the future.
No, but that's the fates of empires,
So now these conflicts are leading to a phenomenal rise in the number of refugees in the world. I was the president of the Refugee Foundation at one stage, and this was only about 20 years ago. And there were
was that part of UN or not? Or was that
in Geneva, yes.
In Geneva, okay,
and
good.
there were
good
a total number of refugees in the world was 24 million.
Wow.
Today there are 65 million.
Boy.
So in 20 years, it has tripled in number.
Right.
And so this is
refugees.
People who are forced to leave their homes, either because of political conditions or because of economic conditions, but who have to move because nobody is willing to sit back and die. And so you have these huge movements of refugees, which is we are trying to control by what we call immigration restrictions.
Like building a wall down in Mexico, like Mr. Trump is on about.
Is a false word. Migration is the real world, which is a forced reason to move out. And I'm sorry, people will move out willy-nilly. The next problem is that because of all this, the growth of frustrations is increasing enormously in the world. And these frustrations are then giving rise to what we call terrorism. And terrorism is growing, but people are not going to accept to be condemned to early death. And so they will react. People don't like to die early. And so they will try to move out in order to survive for longer. And so the frustrations are going to lead to, are going to increase. And
Along ethnic lines, you think?
no, there's no such thing as ethnic. People are either colored or colorless. We are all Africans in origin.
Well, we're all one, but they have these ethnic identities that they that they take stock in. Or
No, that is because we moved in different directions.
Yeah, right.
And as we lived in different areas,
Yeah, right.
we developed different foods and
Right.
different languages
Yeah.
and different particularities.
Yeah, that's right.
But basically, we are all Africans in origin.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
The next problem, major problem that we have in the world is that of women. Women,
what?
Women.
Women.
Women have been dominated by men for centuries.
Well, because they were weaker physically, I think.
That's right. Only because men had thicker muscles. They don't have better brains. And in fact, if you examine the physical
A lot
difference...
of women would think they have a less cultured, gay way of being the men than the women do. A lot of women would think that men are sort of primitive in their thinking. And there's something to be said for that.
Women are a superior entity compared to men. The difference between men and women is justified only because of reproduction and the ability to reproduce the species. And in the reproduction, the role of men is nothing compared to the role of women. A man's role is 5 minutes at best.
Yeah, right.
The role of a woman is first 9 months of carrying a baby, then a difficult thing called childbirth, then 15 years of nurturing a child. So there is no comparison between women's contribution to the future and men's contribution to the future. And yet men have managed to dominate women because of their thicker muscles.
Now, does that have anything to say about the nature of the universe or anything like that, or the nature of reality? There's a male function and a female function in terms of all of evolution and so forth?
No,
it's not just a thing. It's not just thing characteristic of the Homo sapien species. It's throughout the organic or the animated existence.
Some of the change is coming because of capitalism, because of the fact that more and more women can make money. And as they become generators of money, they get greater independence and don't have to listen to the men.
Well, how about the fact that some people are better off than others? We said in the earlier program we did with you, there's about 12 or 20 people or something like that that own practically all the capital in the world.
Yes,
but very, very concentrated ownership of the capital assets that are responsible for technological production and increasingly does not need human input, labor, to produce the product. It's going to be independent of that.
Yes, sir, but there was a time recently, within the past few years, where Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Philippines, which is one third of the population of the world, we had women heads of state or heads of government. Women were ruling these countries. I'm waiting for the day when the United States will have a woman president, because it deserves.
Did with Mrs. Hillary almost.
I don't know. I want to see women having equal opportunity, equal pay for equal work in this country, which is the most decent and most developed country in the world.
That's very interesting in and of itself, but that then does reify, as it were, in terms of economic theory, because these things are all done within economic theorizing that is fulfilling our universities with classes and so forth about justice and so forth. And it is the idea that, you know, the labor theory of value is something that informed Keynes and the people who set up the Bretton Woods and everything. They're assuming that the major input to production is labor. Labor has been important in terms of their contribution to production. Historically, you had to have people to pick the cotton. You had to have people to plow the fields. You had to have labor to produce wealth. Now it's getting to the point, at least this is what the intellectual understanding of things is, it's now the technology inanimate. Technology will not need the labor that they had to have. I was in Detroit, I raised, and they had my grandfather was a person who had been, Henry Ford used to tinker in my grandmother's garage. They set up an assembly line. Everybody could come to the line, they turn a nut all day long. They do some repetitive thing that is called labor production that they then get rewarded for by having a role in production. That labor input to the production writ large is now becoming put on the dustbin of history. It's now the capital instruments that are going to be productive without the need of labor input.
Yes, but
so the distribution of buying power to the masses of the people has only been through their labor production, the labor theory of value. All of the communist and socialist thinking is reifying the idea that labor is so important, but it's becoming undercut by the technological development. So how are we going to get buying power into the hands of people when they're not needed as serfs, as they were on a feudal estate, or as laborers in the modern economy, which is a problem? How are we going to get buying power in their hands if they're not needed in order to clear the market of the good things that can be produced?
Yes, but
and where is it being offered by some economic theorist?
No, but
or who is it that offers that?
Numbers will tell. Half of the population of the world is women, and they're not going to take it for long. And so the change is taking place already. You notice that in the recent elections in the United States.
Yes.
More and more women are coming into politics because they say we can't trust you men.
It's a big issue this time come around,
And rightly so, because why should half of the population of the world be relegated to a secondary position? And so...
No, but not that, if I may. How are we going to get buying power distributed to the masses of the people who have been in the history of the world? You've had a few people in the castle. They had everybody else were serfs. They did what they were told. They were peasants, as it were. And how are we going to get it to where we're going to have buying power distributed to people when they're not needed as serfs or as people slaves on a feudal estate? Or a few people own everything like Caesar did and so forth. How are we going to get buying power into the hands of the people when the technological capability to produce a massive a surplus capability to provide life support to people when they're not needed as serfs?
You don't have to do anything about it. It will happen automatically.
How?
Because
what economic theory will provide that?
Very
How
simple.
are you going to get over the labor theory of value that informs most, left-wing thinking is how important labor is to the productive process? It's going to be eliminated as necessary for production of material goods and services.
It is not going to be a labor theory. The women will take care of you and will put you men in your own place.
I think you're drawing it, well, with all due respect, I think that's just drawing a dialectic out of history. They had the male, female, and all that kind of stuff. This is something that's coming that's much larger than that. How are we going to form capital that's going to produce wealth technologically, and when the capital ownership is what gets money, only the thing that's producing it, rather than the labor. The laborers are not going to be needed. So how are we going to justify distributing buying power to the masses to buy the good things that can be produced within a technologically well-organized society, including all the input of new technology?
Because if labor is going to become less important as technology develops,
eliminated,
then women will come into their own because they have as good brains as the men. And
but
so
that's just a thing. Okay. You want to? I think that's a minor thing compared to the fact that the people as laborers or as workers or distributed, you get a job, you get paid. You get paid for that. And that's how they distribute buying power to the people to build the economies.
Yes, sir. But
and it's limited.
You have been totally unfair in the past because men and women are being given different pays for equal work. And so even if the work is equal, a woman is only 87 cents to the dollar.
But beyond that, sir,
how can you forget that?
Beyond that, the women are not going to be needed as workers within a productive process. It's going to be cars are going to drive themselves. The things are going to be automatic. They're not going to need human beings doing something in order to justify having money to buy things for their kids.
Then the only people who will survive are viruses and germs. Because human beings will no longer be necessary, according to you.
Yeah. No, human beings, in the way they have been, the change we're going through is not something like we can get out of history. We're coming into rather like 75 million years ago, was it 45 million years ago, Yucatan thing did in all the dinosaurs, made way for us, okay? Now we're coming into that kind of a change. It's like speciation, or we're coming into a new way of being that can't be seen from the historical pattern.
Yeah, but at the moment, the dinosaurs are the men who have tried to deny the future to women. And so...
Well, that's a long, or you could say the white men against the black, you know, all of that. You could do all those class things.
You will come down to your proper space vis-a-vis 50% of the population of the world who are women, who are a superior entity in terms of the propagation of the species. And so you will find your own
Do you
level.
think we're going to have money distributed to people by how many children they have? It
No.
goes the exact opposite now. They just starve.
That is because you are not producing enough children in many developed societies.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we're just talking about something different. I think it's beyond that. The women are not going to be able to have a job they're going to go to produce, help in the production, because they're not going to be needed. They're going to be displaced by technological systems that don't need people as workers.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to
You're very you understand exponential increasing of technological,
Absolutely.
and it's going exponentially now. And it's creating a system where you need something other than the traditional economic theorizing of Keynes or Marx or whoever we go by, are thinking in terms of talking about men and women within the old way of seeing things.
That, incidentally, is the next global change. That is, say, the growth of information technology.
Thank you. You're an expert in that.
Information technology.
I think it tends to put aside the systems by which we've thought about economics in the past, and we don't have it. I don't know where it's coming from. We don't see it in any of our political class now.
The information technology is growing astronomically.
Exponentially.
Exponentially
is a whole different thing.
And in fact, some of the speed at which it is growing is beyond absorptive capacity of human beings. And so we find that it is more and more difficult to adjust to the changes. And one of the fascinating things is to go to a school for kindergarten school. And you find kindergarten kids, 5-year-old, who are operating computers and operating them better than...
5-year-olds are my favorite human beings. They absolutely have no artifice at all. Do you notice? They have no artifice. They're totally honest. We should make a world safe for adults to be totally honest.
And they're doing it better than you and me in their use of the computers. They know which key to push, whereas you have to work it out before you can do that.
And that's growing exponential again.
And as that happens, this is a major change which is taking place in the world. And the question is the speed of this change controllable or uncontrollable? Because it is going exponentially, not just in terms of change, but in terms of the speed of the change.
Yeah, thank you. That's exponential.
And are you and I, with the capacity of our brains, which is limited, going to be able to adjust to the speed
or you
of
and
the
I,
computer?
or humanity in general? I don't think we've come to that point yet in terms of our economic theorizing about how we're going to organize the planet.
Yes.
In terms of what's emerging, not in terms of what has been.
Yeah. But the simple test of that is if I ask you to multiply 731 by 549.
Oh, I got that. That's no problem. I got it here right on my... I've written it on here.
But if you do it on a computer, it does it much faster than you.
I'm here.
So how is
and you're an expert on that. Don't you think that it's going to displace the need for slaves called wage earners that have been the way in which the economies have been set up along terms, don't you think? The exponential increasing of the technology is going to be, in a sense, taking on a life of its own.
But the question
is... And it's not being adequately addressed.
The question is, how can you, as a human being, accept a slave computer working faster and better than you? Well, are you going to say, okay?
Well, how about if that slave computer that's doing that is providing a material way of life that is far better for all of the kids? Everybody's got food to eat. Nobody's going to have to starve in order for somebody to be able to eat. It's not always zero sum. For one to win, somebody else has to lose. That kind of thinking is what has motivated the whole Homo sapiens species evolutionary process. If you get to be where everybody is involved in it, like 100 trillion cells in a human organism, I think we mentioned it before, every cell matters, every sense has an identity, and they work as a system. So we got to get a liberated humanity to get to a new level of being that is almost like speciating, not just merely another change in history.
Yes, but I've traveled a lot.
Maybe that's outdated or not but I think that's the challenge before us, and it's not being addressed by our intellectual community.
I've traveled a lot in Africa.
I know you have.
And the only people who work in Africa are the women.
No.
The men are all sitting outside smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. The women are
seems
working.
like New York to me too,
The
you know,
women
or
are working.
all over the world it's like that. Yeah.
So
Men are big, hairy beasts.
I'm sorry, my faith is in women.
Well, I've got a great liking for women as well. My mother is the best, you know. I've had a couple ladies.
But
Yeah, I agree with the feminine principle.
I
Yeah.
have serious reservations about you because you are the wrong gender. But women are the future. And if you join us this up
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting
with
thing.
information technology, that is the future. It's going to be IT plus
You
women.
equate the feminine principle with technology?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Well, that's a very big... I think that's what I was asking in a
Yes.
certain sense.
Women-
That's an interesting take. I have never
women
thought
plus
that way.
IT is the future. Now, these are the
You
major...
think the IT future is feminine?
Yes.
That's
Because
your assumption there.
it does not
Okay.
require muscles and labor,
Right, okay.
which was your advantage over women,
Okay.
was that you had harder muscles and thicker muscles.
I don't have such good muscles. I had my sister used to beat up on me regularly when I was about 10 years old because she was bigger than me, if I remember right.
But that brings us to the second thing that
Okay,
we
let's
need to
go past
discuss,
that, yeah.
which is what are the possible future developments which are going to take
Yes, sir.
place
Yeah.
in comparison to all these past problems.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
One of these future developments is the question of the iPhone. The iPhone is a
Major.
full-fledged computer
Yeah.
in your pocket.
Absolutely.
And
Amazing.
it gives you, as an individual, the same access to information as the president of the most powerful country in the world.
Isn't it
And
amazing? Isn't it amazing?
Absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people now know that they have access to information and that they can use that information. And that has created what I think is a negative result, which is instant democracy. Everybody can now just press a button and send a message to 1 million people.
I like the way you're talking, yeah.
And that,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
afraid,
true,
I'm
yeah.
a lover of coffee.
So is that you're equating that with the female principle in universe?
Because
Yeah,
I am
maybe
a
there's something
lover
to be
of
said for that.
coffee.
Yeah.
And coffee is good when it is brewed slowly and carefully. Instant coffee is not coffee. Instant Nescafe is brown water.
Are you a shell for the coffee makers instead of the Nescafe?
I'm not a Nescafe man at
You're
all.
not at all.
I'm a
You're
brewed
a shell
coffee
for
person.
the old-time real brewers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so,
Who's paying you? A public relations firm is paying you to spread that
no,
stuff
nobody.
around
But
society.
in-
You're making a pitch for
I'm not
for
ma-
real coffee rather than for fake coffee.
I'm making a pitch for questioning the total
And the real
result.
coffee is
no,
feminine.
No, the total result of the iPhone.
Oh,
The
okay.
iPhone
Yeah.
has created instant democracy, which is Nescafe democracy, if you wish.
Oh, that's the comparison. Okay.
And
All
you
right.
need, in order to think properly, you have to think critically. And critical thinking takes time.
Yeah.
And you need to sit back
Yeah.
and think carefully before arriving at an opinion.
Okay.
Instant opinions, which is what we are now exercising,
Yeah, and
are
it's coming faster.
not necessarily good opinions. And
But
so,
it is the trend.
but you have to think about it. Is it a trend that you can just accept and say, okay, let's have instant
Well,
democracy?
you could be in the womb and say, I ain't going to leave here. It's warm and nice and everything, but all of a sudden there you are in another realm. That would be like a process. Maybe it's too much to think that we're coming to the... Do you think we're the end of evolutionary principle in the universe, this Homo sapiens species? Or is there an order, a larger order to things that we may be coming into? We're leaving the womb of our humanity's time.
Well, either you have to improve your brains to be at the speed of computers, or
yeah.
you have to slow down computers to work at the speed of your brains.
Or maybe we can get cooperation between the two of them.
I don't know. At the
Can
moment,
we get male and female, if that's the right term, if you're taking that, to come together in a way that they've not been able to do except very
I think
erratically and so forth over history?
that is a valid argument, because I think
Is
we
that
have to,
East and West then? The East
No,
is
it's-
East and
it's
West is West, and never the twain shall meet?
Femalization
Yeah,
of
okay.
decision making
Okay.
is what we need.
Yeah.
And you cannot have it in terms of instant democracy.
No.
The second problem
Well,
that
that's a very large. I think you got a lot of women who might agree with you on that, and probably a lot of men too would think. Yeah.
the second problem that we are having is that of institutions becoming questioned. We discussed this earlier today,
Yeah.
that globalization was a fundamental part of history. Take, for example, a very simple thing. 4,500 years ago, 3,500 BC,
Yeah.
you had a lot of copper in the world.
Yeah.
Copper was in Cyprus, which
Yeah.
is why the scientific
That's right.
symbol for copper is Cu.
I didn't
Because
realize that. Yeah.
Cyprus
Okay.
was where the copper was.
Yeah.
But copper is not a strong metal. It's tensile and it bends
Yeah.
easily.
And it
In
melts
order to
easy.
make it strong,
Yeah.
you have to convert it into bronze.
Bronze, right.
Now, bronze
Tin?
comes by adding tin to
Yeah,
copper.
right, uh-huh.
Now, the tin,
Yeah.
3,500 BC,
Yeah.
was all in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And it used to come from Afghanistan to Cyprus, where then
To
it
make
was
bronze.
added to the
The
tin.
Bronze Age,
And
huh?
that's how the Bronze Age started
Yeah, right.
in the year 3,500 BC.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
this is well
yeah.
before the Iron Age.
Yeah,
The Iron Age
yeah.
came in 1500 BC.
Right.
So, globalization started 5,000 years ago.
Oh, you think
And,
that
you know,
was the start of globalization?
And so you can't just suddenly say, no, globalization
Let
should
me ask
give
you a
way.
general question. You're very thoughtful and you're very intellectually, and you've been and I really laud your work at the UN and your intellectual contributions and so forth. Are you optimistic or pessimistic for the human prospect?
Oh, optimistic.
You
in
are
the long term.
optimistic.
Yes.
You don't think Pollyannish-ly
No, because
optimistic.
we are going to control the iPhones and the computers and this
We being
men and human beings.
human beings.
Yes, we are not going to allow the artificial intelligence to overtake us, because
You don't think it's doing it in some
no, they
people's
don't have
thought?
critical capacity.
Yeah.
They just build up a database, and on the basis of the database, they arrive at a conclusion. I'm sorry, that's not critical thinking. Critical thinking is based on doubt. In French, you have a proverb which is wrongly translated into English as saying, "I think, therefore I am."
Yeah, right.
That's not a correct translation.
Right.
The correct translation is, "I can doubt, therefore I exist."
Boy, that's
It's
a
your
thought.
ability to doubt.
Have you got that one copyrighted? That sentence?
I'll
That thought. Have you got the copyright on
I'll
that thought?
allow
Or that
you-
theorem? You can
I'll-
put it in the theorem and
I'll
get the copyright on
I'll
it.
allow you to borrow it and to copyright it.
I'd be the worst. I would be the worst. I'm terrible. All I
but-
can do is talk.
Existence depends on the ability to doubt.
Okay.
And that doubt ability
yeah.
is what computers do not have. And so they give you,
don't think it can
an
have
answer.
it. Is that intuition?
It's not intuition.
No,
it's
it's
the
not
ability
intuition.
to sit back and say, perhaps I'm wrong. And that ability to say, perhaps I'm wrong, is what our human intelligence allows us to do.
Okay, yeah.
The next major change,
Yes,
which
please.
I think, because we are discussing what changes are going to occur as a result of the problems, we have relegated the family to a secondary position. And this has happened because Plato, in the year 2,300 years ago, wrote his book called The Republic, in which he said he is the father of democracy. And he said it is very important for governance to take care of the requirements of the governed, the human beings. And in order to do that, he said you have to train people to become good governors. And that, he said, cannot be done by the family. So Plato started this concept of taking children away from the family and bringing them up in special institutions, which we call schools and colleges and universities. And so till today, we don't trust the family to bring up children. But that is a big mistake. The family is the best source of education. And so we have to bring back the family as the source of critical, fundamental education and not put too much trust
What is
in
preventing us
institutions.
from doing that en masse?
I think we just are making sure that everybody has to leave his family and go to school, and the families are becoming income earners and not
But why
bringing up
should
children.
somebody have to go to school when they've got all the world at their fingertips, right at their desk, or wherever they are? They don't have to go and listen to a school marm saying
No
that.
desk,
You understand?
no desk can teach you critical doubt. Critical doubt cannot be learned at your desk. It can only be learned by human contact with fellow human beings, starting with the family.
So what is your feeling about our institutions of education? And that would be like conditioning to fit into society, and the responsibility of the leaders to setting up a system for dealing with the youth.
I think we will have a retreat from the Platonic theory of the institution into the future of the family as a fundamental start of education.
Really? You do? You
It
think
is in the family
that
that
would
you will
be
start.
good if every family could be.
The first educational institution is
But
the
there are
family.
some families that wouldn't be. It would be detrimental. There's so much angst, particularly probably primarily because of material reasons of poverty. They can't have a very encouraging system that you're in if you're in poverty or
Yes,
if you're in distress,
but we've
which
already-
is the lot of so many of our people,
No,
and
sir.
we let it go on.
No, sir. We've already agreed that poverty has to be eliminated, and it can only be eliminated by shifting either aid or investment or trade.
What about
from the rich-
investment? But the investment goes into the production of economic of systems that are going to be producing the wealth of nations, is said.
Yes,
it's
but
going to be producing the wealth without the need of human activity to produce the wealth of nations.
That's not quite true, sir. I'll
You
tell
think
you why.
the input of human activity is going to be essential to the production of the overall economy of the world?
Take Pakistan as an example. Pakistan is a developing country.
Yeah.
But we are very powerful in cotton, in high staple cotton. Pakistan has 17% of the global cotton in the world. So we produce first class bed sheets, towels, shirts, T-shirts, etc.
Yeah.
I can, in Pakistan, double the per capita income of Pakistan within 3 years if I did not have to face the restrictions on trade in the powerful countries of the world, North America, Europe, Japan, etc. I can only sell so many jeans. All the blue jeans that you have in the United States are coming from Pakistan.
Cartelization, huh?
Yeah, because Pakistan is producing blue jeans at $1.87 a pair.
Yeah,
but
but
we
how
can't
come-
sell more than so many million in a year.
Yeah.
If I could
You
double
mean in
that.
Pakistan?
No, in the world,
in
because
the
how
world.
many blue jeans can we wear
Well,
in Pakistan?
isn't the quality of the product, isn't that the test in terms of the market? That's what the market would say. The best will emerge, you know.
No,
so-
the best textiles are in countries like Pakistan, undoubtedly. But we can only sell so much.
Yeah, okay,
Because
yeah,
we
right,
come
okay,
up against plantations in the developed countries, and
Right,
people
right.
want to prevent their own industries and plantations,
Yeah,
and don't
okay.
allow more products to come in.
They're getting uppity,
Yeah, if you
is
wish.
the way they used to say.
And exploitative. Exploitative.
Yeah,
Because-
exploitative, yeah.
yes.
That's the history of the world, in my way of thinking.
Yes, sir, but you can't defend.
And it continues.
You cannot defend piracy, national piracy,
Right.
as the history of the future.
Yeah.
It has to be more equitable interactivity.
I think those are terms that could be up on a plaque somewhere. It has to be equitable.
and
that's something
interactive.
and interactive, yeah.
And not self-centered.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So that is the problem of the family. And finally, the question is, and you keep asking me this question, who is going to do the questioning? The
The
questioning...
intellectual community is falling down on the job.
No, sir. The questioning is going to be done by the youth. It is the young people who are going to teach you how to suck eggs, because you don't know how to work. You are so confident in what you call the wisdom of the aged, of the people who are older. That is not true. Your best performance is between the ages of 20 and 30.
For
And
certain things.
For
yeah.
everything.
You really think that?
For everything. You are...
I got
at
the
your-
solution. Let's just wipe everybody out. You know, once you get 30, it's all over. You know, they have a place out. You know, there's little comic kind of books that are taken along. You get rid of everybody over 30. Let's just wipe everybody out over 30. And
They
that'll be
will
the solved problem.
automatically, you see, when I teach classes at universities.
Yes, you do. Yes.
I teach only MA classes, master's level. I tell my students, ask your professors, are you over 30 or under 30? And if he says I'm over 30, I say, garbage everything that he says. It's not worth listening to.
Oh, well, that's a little bit overdoing it, particularly since I'm not under... I remember I had something along those lines sometimes, once in a while, sneak in when I was about 27 or so.
But I asked you how old you are, and you said 27, so you're okay
right.
for the next 3 years.
So I'm in under the wire, yeah.
So youth, I have confidence in the ability of
You're
youth.
optimistic for the human prospect.
Absolutely, because of youth.
We got how many more years we have? I mean...
It'll change, because we are coming slowly into a crisis in the world.
A crisis, right?
Crisis is coming because of this growth of nationalism in the world. And as that crisis emerges, youth will stand up and say, and women will stand up and say,
where
listen to
among
us.
the youth do you find such a guiding principle? We had Socrates and others who had great thought about that. Or we had John Maynard Keynes, or the people who came up with economic theorizing on forming capital, how you're going to organize society. Where is it among the youth that you find this emerging?
You don't have to do anything. They will do it themselves.
No. Do you find anybody that could be like John Maynard Keynes was for economics? Or
When I teach classes, all my students are obviously younger than me.
Yeah, right.
The questions that they ask me are far more interesting than what I'm teaching them. They think I am teaching them. What they don't know is that my secret is that I'm learning from the youth in my classes. Their questions are teaching me.
You're taking advantage of the poor folks.
I am.
You're just taking that money and running with it to the bank, right?
It's not a question of money. I'm picking up information and wisdom
So you
from
think
the
it'll
youth.
come from the youth? I guess maybe it does. The really creative breakthroughs do come, mathematically or otherwise, in youth, you know.
Yes, great things have been done.
So maybe we should just have old farms where we search the old people out to at the end, you know. Have farms that we can put them all out on, and all the youth can celebrate in their youthful exuberance.
And you see, we have a tendency.
I think not. I think it's got to be something including everybody.
But we have a tendency to look down on youth and to say, well, it is the wisdom of the ages, of age.
Yeah, that's been a thing.
But, you know, great things have been done by people under the age of 30.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, mathematically
great
and everything.
music.
Yeah.
There's a chap who conquered half the world at the age of 26.
I wonder if that holds for evolution. We're part of an evolutionary process on this planet, and there's been larger evolutionary developments, and there's a process of the species, there's an origin of species and new things appearing. So some of those understandings we have from science could be maybe applied to the human condition more than it is allowed to.
I think the best that we can do is to encourage youth with whom we come into contact to stand up and think critically and to come forward with solutions.
You don't think they're doing that on their own now?
They are also.
Why are they not? Or if they are, where are they?
Yes, but I'm interested in the fact...
Who is emerging? Is there anybody in particular that's emerging?
It's not a question of individuals.
Oh, it's not?
Youth as a whole are waking up. And we must encourage them to wake up and to stand up and contribute.
And what about the old folks? Shouldn't they wake up as well? Or couldn't they they could set off an alarm bell that could be heard and wake up the olders as well?
I think you should sit back and learn how to celebrate not a 3-hour weekend, but a 7-day weekend.
Well, maybe there might be something to be said for that. But I'll tell you, one thing I think the shot to hell is to be living in interesting time. We are living the most interesting time. I think this is the most interesting time in 200,000 years of our existence.
But
we're coming to a qualitative, not quantitative
Don't
change.
use that term. I'll tell you why.
Why? Okay.
In China, the Chinese are very polite people.
Yes, they are.
They never use 4-letter words when they want to abuse somebody. When you are really angry with somebody and want to abuse him, you say, may you live in interesting times.
Yes, I remember that. Whoever came up with that might be part of the coterie that could build this new world. But you are optimistic for
Very
the
much
human prospect.
Very much so.
You think we're not going to blow it all up?
For
or
the
something?
simple reason
Yes,
that
sir.
I'm old and therefore not likely to live for long.
But you felt that way when you were young, did you not?
No, but now I have one foot in the grave and the other slipping.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm going to end.
Yeah.
But my confidence is in the youth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's well placed because it's the youth that really carry the new things and everything like that. I guess it has been like that. Well, in any case, it's really important. We have these institutions that we have, and we have thinking. I wish there was more. I could find more coming out of the youth than I seem to be able to. There seems to be a lot of young people coming into the government now that talk the same old language that has been talked by politicians going back to the beginning of time. And I don't see new ideas emerging in terms of answering the basic questions that confront us coming out of youth or our leadership, for that matter, our political leadership.
That is because you are not under 30.
I'm not, well, okay. Well, I'm not sure that the people who are under 30 are necessarily thinking. There's an optimism that when you're in that age and so forth like that. I told you about climbing up on Mount McKinley.
Yes.
When I told you that in an earlier program.
Yeah.
That taught me a lesson and everything. I was all in the embrace of Mother Nature and all that kind of thing. But anyway, that's just another story. But it's an incredibly interesting time to be alive and participant in this. And I would submit this is the most incredible. And I think we're coming for a qualitative, not a quantitative change, a qualitative change that is going to be only comparable to something like speciation. We're coming into a new way of relating to the universe, coming out of the womb of history. And that's the sort of thing that I think is going to call for some major changes coming out of all of us, including the elders who are responsible for the political institutions and so forth, but also the women and also the young men.
And if I can express a hope and a wish for both you and me, it is that we may live long enough to be able to see the change which is going to come.
Thank you. On that, we agree by all means. And your pleasure, as I could say, it's been your pleasure. We're almost coming to the end and everything. To have the perceptions of yeah, we have a couple minutes in here, but it's been so good talking with you, Ahmad, and it's a pleasure for you to have had his distinct thoughts. You have a website and so forth. Would you encourage people to be in touch with you and your thinking? Because and you have written work and so forth. And how can people be in touch with you on an ongoing basis?
I have produced about a dozen books.
Yes, right.
And all of them are on the website, and all of them are available for free download.
Okay, that's good.
So
I like that.
You can just download them for free.
Free is a very good price.
Yes.
Yeah, it is indeed. And what is that website? Maybe you could say it now. We got a minute or so.
It is www.UN, which stands for United Nations,
Yes.
.int, which stands for International, /Kamal, Kamal, /publications.
Say it again, please.
So it's www.un.int
And we're going to bring it up. Go ahead.
/Kamal /publications.
Okay, once again, why don't you say it one more time now with the string? Keep that on the screen. www.un. What is it?
INT.
INT.
/Kamal /publications.
Okay, and if you have to just do a search of Ahmad Kamal, there will come all kinds of wonderful things that come up if you go take that and put it into your smartphone or your computer. And Ahmad, once again, thank you for such a very, very, very well-led life that continues.
Thank you for the pleasure and the honor done to me.
Oh, well, okay. Thank you very much for viewing. There you got his email. Thank you very much for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. But once again, Ahmad, thank you very, very much for coming in, and welcome to MNN. May we welcome you over here to MNN. Maybe you could get involved over here.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Okay. Thank you for viewing. We'll come back tomorrow. Well, that's about it and everything, and we just keep going. You know, I'm a little bit dismaying. I don't know where the thinking's coming from. I don't see it.